It's time to get rowdy with Rusty this week in wrestling on That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout.
Hello, it's time once again, and it is your pleasure for That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout. Good God, and I'm not even Diamond Dallas Page. My name is Rusty Loudermilk, and welcome to episode number 7 of That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout, the fastest 30 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever the hell it is, in television or radio or whatever the hell we're on for your wrestling news. So let's get started. We start this week with episode of Dark Side of the Ring, the Dino Bravo episode. Dino Bravo, most of you know him from working in the WWF in the 1980s. I first met him when he was working in Jim Crockett Promotions, NWA, in the 70s, before going to Vince McMahon in the 80s. I only met him once. He was a good guy, seemed like a nice fellow. But anyway, this Dark Side of the Ring dealt with not only a career retrospective of Dino Bravo, but the actual murder of Dino Bravo and the circumstances that surrounded it. Looks like he had gotten into some criminal activity with the mob, or what the equivalent to the mob is there in Canada, and in different things. It was a sad situation. His daughter was on there. His ex-wife, I believe, was on there, and they talked about the circumstances surrounding that. He was shot in the chest and in the head multiple times. And if you haven't seen it, go back and check it out on Vice TV or on YouTube if you don't have Vice TV in your area. It was a real good documentary. Rest in peace, Dino Bravo, because you were not just a WWF star. You were a wrestling star, and I was proud to know you, dude. We also have some sad news this week. Longtime 1980s booker, promoter, announcer, owner, and jack of all trades and master of none, and host of the Pro Wrestling This Week with Gordon Soley in the 1980s, Joe Pedicino passed away. Condolences to his friends and family and his wife, Bonnie Blackstone. I never met Joe and Bonnie, but folks that did meet them say they were good people. And so Joe passed away at his home in Atlanta. I'm not sure of the age, but I believe it was 69 or 70. But I'm sorry to hear that. It seems like every week we tend to start this report with some bad news over the last several weeks. Also, former WWF referee from the 1970s and 80s, John Lutz, passed away at the age of 86 from complications due to coronavirus. John Lutz was not known by many people. You guys are probably sitting there saying, who the hell was that? But he happened to be the ref in most of those Rock and Wrestling Connection things, not with Mick Foley and The Rock, but the Rock and Wrestling Connection with Cyndi Lauper and Wendy Richter and all those back in the day. He wasn't there for all of them, but he was there for most of them. So rest in peace, Joe Pedicino and John Lutz. Never knew either one of you, but your contributions to the wrestling industry will not be missed. From the Dead Brand department over at Impact, Willie Mack is the new X Division champion of Impact after night one of their Rebellion pay-per-view. I don't know how you can have a pay-per-view when you give it away on free access TV, but what do I know? Skipping on to WWE. Trouble in Vinnie Mac land this week. Most of you might know Oliver Luck. Now, if that name sounds familiar, Oliver Luck is the father of Indianapolis Colts football player Andrew Luck. Oliver Luck was the former West Virginia University athletic director. Then he went to another job before taking a job with the now defunct XFL for the second time, and Oliver Luck is filing a lawsuit against Vince McMahon and XFL's parent company Alpha Entertainment, stating that he signed a contract with the XFL and Vince McMahon for $20 to $25 million, and is saying that he was only 2 years in to a 5-year deal. So he wants to be paid for the remainder. The problem is that some say that his contract was signed with the XFL and not with Vince McMahon. So bottom line is we'll have to let the courts decide whether since the XFL went bankrupt, if the contract is valid or if he needs to sue Vince McMahon personally. More on that in later weeks as details become available. A couple of things from the Come On Man file moment. This makes me pissed off to get out of my wheelchair here. Yes, I'm in a wheelchair for those of you who didn't know, and I'm damn proud to say it. Playing the wheelchair card on this episode. Anyway, long story short, Rob Gronkowski is your new WWE 24/7 champion. Yeah, the same Rob Gronkowski that came out of retirement, who used to play for the New England Patriots and now is a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. The problem is that when he signed his contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he can no longer do anything that is not approved by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Therefore, he is your WWE 24/7 champion, and you don't know how you're going to get the belt off of him. So that's Come On Man Part A. Come On Man Part B is, earlier this week, the Florida governor declared WWE as an essential business. And now, if you're going to do this and declare WWE an essential business, you must do it for all wrestling organizations, and then not just ones who have a super PAC that contributed $18 million, and I'll leave it at that. But both of those are Come On Man moments for this week here on the podcast. Some other WWE news. Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows, who just signed a 5-year deal a couple of months ago with the WWE, have been released and will only be paid for 90 days. So the next time I hear somebody, especially my old buddy Tommy Angel, say Vince McMahon's a genius, I wonder if Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows would say the same thing now, because they're only going to be paid for the next 90 days. Word is from my old buddy Mike Mooneyham that they most likely will either end up in AEW or New Japan Pro Wrestling, where they were before in NJPW, before coming to the WWE. Moving right along, switching over to AEW, show opened with a pre-taped segment of Cody talking about the TNT Championship and how he would like to win it. We then skip on to a Sammy Guevara and Darby Allin TNT Championship tournament match. Darby wins with the Last Supper leg lock, which was sort of like an Indian death lock for those of you wrestling fans from the 1980s, just in reverse. We then skip on to a Kenny Omega versus Jobber match. It was like 2 out of 5 stars. Let me back up and tell you that the Sammy G and Darby Allin match was 3 out of 5 stars. Then we skip on to a Scorpio Sky video that talked about his career and how he wanted to become a wrestler and his hardships growing up poor before making it big in the wrestling industry. The video is very good. If you haven't seen it, please go back and look at this week's episode of AEW, because it is totally out of character and shows you the real Scorpio Sky, not just the one you see on TV. The video was 5 stars. Moving on, Jimmy Havoc versus Orange Cassidy. You guys know I hate Orange Cassidy, but that's another story for another day. 3 out of 5 stars. OC wins but gets beat up after the match. Moving on to the best heel in the wrestling business, an MJF, Maxwell Jacob Friedman video. Hopefully one day he'll want to come on a podcast like this and talk to us. I'm going to try that too. I'm still on Cornette. But anyway, that was best in the business. We then find out that MJF's supposed injury was nothing more than a hangnail that he got when he was betting on last week's edition, or a few weeks ago rather, edition of AEW Wrestling. So hopefully MJF will get over his hangnail injury and come back being the best heel worker, not only in AEW, but in the industry. We then see a Wardlow versus Jobber match. Won't even bother you with that. That's my P-break match of the week for 2 stars. Brody Lee and a Jobber match, another 2 stars. Looked like they were trying to fill time. Then we get to the main event, which was a TNT tournament match. Dustin Rhodes, the natural Dustin Rhodes, putting his career on the line. Seems like he's done that a lot these days, and I'm getting sort of tired of it. AEW is my favorite product. It's Danny J's favorite product. It's almost everybody's favorite product. But come on now, let's quit with the career on the line every week here. It's getting a little old. Anyway, Dustin Rhodes versus Kip Sabian. Dustin wins with a 3-star match. Moving on to NXT. Velveteen Dream was talking about Finn Balor. And then NXT champ Adam Cole gets into a massive verbal argument with the Undisputed Era, which is this sort of like Horseman type NXT faction group. And then North American champ Keith Lee hits the ring and saves Velveteen Dream. And then a brawl ensues. And then the Undisputed Era does the chicken shit heel thing and powders out of the ring. 4 stars, and that's 4 stars is saying a lot because I generally don't like NXT, but that was great. Moving on to NXT Cruiserweight Championship Tournament, the interim Cruiserweight Championship Tournament, because the real champion is not going to be able to be back for months because he's stuck in England due to the coronavirus stuff. So they're having an interim championship tournament to crown a new champion. I don't know what they're going to do when the other champion gets back. But anyway, Drake Maverick, who is on his way out the door and has been released by WWE, versus Jake Atlas. They worked hard. Maverick is now, as I said, released by WWE due to the layoffs, but at least they let him come back and do that one match. And they even showed a video of him getting released, which I thought was a little tasteless, but that's just WWE for you. Then we move on to Tony Nese versus Kushida, another 4-star match, and Kushida wins after Tony Nese taps out. The interviews on NXT absolutely suck. The backstage interviewer McKenzie is worse than Chinese water torture or a toothache. It's just terrible. We then move on to Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae at the dinner table, talking about how great they are. Their interaction between each other was 4 stars. Obviously, Johnny Gargano is legitimately married to Candice LeRae, so obviously they've got good chemistry with one another. We then move on to NXT Women's Champion Charlotte Flair, who talks about a women's championship title match next week. We then move on to Jack Gallagher versus a NXT star named Phantasma. Phantasma wins with a 4-star match, but his interview sucks after the match. I think that's a language barrier, but I'm not sure what the problem is there. Um, then for the main event, we have Keith Lee and Velveteen Dream versus the Undisputed Era. Tag match was 4 stars. During the match, Damian Priest, formerly Punishment Martinez, and Luis Martinez from Ring of Honor hits Lee in the throat outside of the ring. The refs come down to aid. Lee is then taken to the back, replaced by Loomis. Loomis and Dream wins as show goes off the air. 4 stars, and overall the NXT show was great, and that's a lot coming from me because, as I said earlier, I generally don't like NXT. Moving over to Danny J's favorite product, MLW, episode 107, Superstar Series Week 3. Richard Holiday versus Chessman. 4 stars. Holiday wins after a ref angle. Holiday is still claiming to be the Caribbean champ, but the Caribbean Championship is really held by Savio Vega. The ref angle that I spoke of is where they're doing this thing where the refs in AAA are cheating MLW out of some matches, and they're counting slower than they need to count. So we'll have to wait and see what drama develops between MLW and AAA over this ref angle stuff. We then see Mance Warner continues to be great on the mic with his hillbilly redneck gimmick. We then see a prepackaged video of Colonel Robert Parker, better known as Robert Fuller, trying to still get his manager's license in MLW, but we're having trouble. The announcers say that Robert Parker, even though he does not have a manager's license yet, has signed some MLW stars. So I'm assuming we'll see who those are either this coming week or the week after. We then see a video from Hawaii with the MLW Tag Team Champions Ross and Marshall Von Erich as they talk about Team Filthy and their future and their feud with Team Filthy, and they would like to defend the Tag Team Championships in MLW as soon as possible. We then move on to Los Masoneros, if I'm pronouncing that correct, versus the New Heart Foundation, which is Davey Boy Smith Jr., son of the late Davey Boy Smith, and Brian Pillman Jr., son of the late Brian Pillman. 3 stars in the match. Pre-match mic ring and heel type interview sucked. Heart Foundation wins to give MLW a 4-2 lead in the Superstar Series Challenge Tournament. Video aired of the Contra unit and Killer Cross about to stir things up in MLW. If you don't have MLW, you can catch it on YouTube. And for those of you that have BN Sports, you can catch it on BN Sports as well. Moving on to the last thing this week, NWA Power. We saw a Camille Brickhouse in her first match this week, and she looked good. She is tall and very hot and can move like a small wrestler with the power of a Goldberg or a Chyna, for those of you that remember Goldberg and Chyna. A new pre-tape video aired of her career, and she spoke for the first time about her past and future in the NWA. She's a star in the making, 4 out of 5 stars against another female jobber. Billy Corgan of the rock group Smashing Pumpkins rebooted in 2017 the NWA and has done a great job so far. I look for bigger things from the NWA in the future. Hope they can get on broadcast or cable TV in the near future and not just on YouTube, but you can check out NWA Power each Tuesday at 6:05 on YouTube. And if you can't get it at 6:05 on Tuesday, it stays up there after Tuesday. That's just when it drops. They also hyped a new program called NWA Superpower, which from what I've been able to be told from what I read online, as well as folks in the industry, it will be a pre-taped show in which it'll be like NWA super matches, like it was when the Crockett's had NWA in the 1980s and 70s. So instead of, say, Camille versus the Jobber that I just spoke about, it may be Eli Drake versus Nick Aldis, two main stars, like sort of like a free pay-per-view kind of thing. So more details as that becomes available. All they said so far is that NWA Superpower show will air sometime in May 2020. So keep it right here, and we'll keep you abreast of that and anything else going on in the world of professional wrestling. Be sure to subscribe, hit that notifications button and any other button, because you want all the programming here on the DJB Productions Network, not just the wrestling shows, but every program. I like most of them. I like the Man Cave. I like DJs After Dark. I like that Way Cool Wrestling Show. I like that Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout. Just watch them all. And if you don't have time, just do one a day, but keep it here for not only the best in wrestling, but the best in programming right here on the DJB Productions Network. Until then, we'll see you next time right here. This is Rusty Loudermilk saying stay safe, and we'll see you next week right here.
Thank you for listening to that Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout. We'll see you at the matches. Goodbye, everybody.